You know, it did pass, but 20 Republicans voted against this Senate budget that was up for a vote in the House, including my next guest, a House Budget Committee member, Florida Republican Congressman Matt Gaetz. Congressman, very good to have you. Thanks for taking the time.
Good to be on.
Now, you're not from a high-tax state. I mean, you're actually, no-tax state if you think about it, but you still voted against it. Why?
Well, I'm very proud that Florida has the lowest per capita state taxes in America, but this budget doesn't reflect conservative priorities because it doesn't cut a dime in spending. The House of Representatives sent a budget to the Senate that cut $200 billion in spending, and the swamp creatures over in the Senate, they don't have the guts to cut a nickel in spending, and I think we need to send the message that we not only need tax cuts, we need spending cuts to take the wet blanket off of this economy and to get us moving again.
You know, a number of your colleagues, sir, have said, when it comes to tax cuts, don't treat it like spending. Don't necessarily price them out, cost them out. You say what?
This was not a vote on tax cuts. This was a vote on the budget. And when voting on the budget, we should be able to highlight areas where we should cut spending. One area that was very important to the House was to stop spending money on able-bodied, childless adults who could go to work but instead choose not to. So if we can't do that basic spending reform, I'm very concerned that we won't be able to deal with this mounting debt. If we do not take action to cut spending in the next 10 years, we're looking at upwards of a $30 trillion debt. All the tax cuts in the world won't save this country if we build debts at that level. That's why I want to cut taxes and cut spending. That's what we do in Florida, and it sure works.
It's not going to be a budget measure so much as a tax cut measure that you'll be presumably voting on in a few weeks. We'll get the details, at least, of the broad blueprint next week. All things being what you hear now, a 10-year plan that might not be fully paid for, what do you do?
Well, I'm going to vote for tax cuts if those tax cuts move the economy forward. And I just didn't go to the Nancy Pelosi School of Governing where you had to agree to vote for something before you actually read it. So we've got a commitment from our principal author of the tax package, Mr. Brady. He'll be filing that tax cut legislation on Monday. And I'm hopeful that it's consistent with a blueprint that lowers the corporate tax rate, lowers the individual tax rate.
Let's say it does all of that. Let's say it does all of that, Congressman. I'm sorry I wasn't clear. It does all of that, but the likelihood is it still, drives the debt higher, the combination of all our deficits higher 10 years from now. Would you still vote for it?
Well, my plan is to keep fighting for spending cuts. Look, I want to vote for tax cuts, and if there is a temporary increase in the deficit that we ultimately offset down the road with economic growth, I think all Americans could support that. What I don't support is a budget that doesn't cut a nickel in spending, because that doesn't reflect conservative priorities. But yeah, I think we could take a short-term increase in the deficit if in the long term we get the type of dynamic economic growth that the Obama economy never produced.
So, Congressman, if in the end that meant that, given the likely closeness of this vote, part of the overtures to Democrats to hike rates on the well-to-do or find an additional bracket for the well-to-do, would you be for that?
Look, I think we should lower taxes for all Americans, and I think that really is the rising water that raises all boats. I want to cut the individual tax rate for every American. I want to cut the corporate tax rate so we no longer have the highest corporate taxes in the world, and I think that ultimately will get us to the type of growth that really can help us solve all of our problems, whether that's the debt or meeting the needs of Americans or ensuring that we get the type of wage growth that is absolutely necessary in this country.
Congressman, thank you very, very much. Very good seeing you.
Thank you.